Down the right field line, pretty well hit. LaVarn way is the right way here tonight.
Yogi Berra said it's 90% mental, the other half is physical. My name is Ryan LaVarnway, Major League catcher and minor league grinder, and I've spent the last 15 years playing professional baseball while evolving my mindset. I'm fascinated by optimizing that 90%. In this show, I'll talk to elite athletes and mindset coaches about what makes them tick and how they've overcome obstacles in their own careers on the way to finding success. This is Finding the Way. Hey guys, welcome to Finding the Way with Ryan LaVarnway. I am Ryan LaVarnway, and today I am joined by Adam Mendler, a nationally recognized authority on leadership, creator and host of 30-Minute Mentors, which is the top-rated business and leadership podcast. And on that podcast, he has interviewed more than 500 of America's most successful leaders, as well as publishing over 70 articles in major media outlets. He currently has a graduate-level course on leadership at UCLA, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Adam. Thanks for joining me.
Ryan, great to be here. Fired up, excited.
So off air, we were just talking about you started your leadership journey on a self-described, very mediocre high school team as the captain. Tell me, when I was growing up, I was always told, be a leader, you're the tall kid, you're the best player on the team. But I never was taught how to do it. Were you one of the 1 in 10 that had natural leadership capabilities, or where did the captainship stem from?
Ryan, I was the captain of my baseball team, not because I was good at baseball, but because I was a natural leader. I wish I was good at baseball. I wish I was as good at baseball as you were. I was telling you off the air that I listened to a couple of your podcasts, interview with Ian Kinsler, interview with Kevin Youkilis, great episodes. And Dave, did you have me on this podcast just to bring down the average skill level among Jewish baseball players? Is that the idea here?
No, you know what? I'm having you on the podcast. I think you are the perfect guest because my goal is to bridge the gap between sports and business, because my belief is that teamwork is teamwork, leadership is leadership, peak performance is peak performance, whether you're on the field or in the boardroom or in the office, and you are on the other side of that coin. So I would love to learn lessons from you today that our audience can use whatever field they're in.
I can tell you that your audience will not learn how to hit a baseball from me. They might learn how to run into a baseball. When I was playing in high school, I just wanted to get on base any way I could, didn't matter how. One thing I was very good at was stealing bases. I was good in the field, I was good on the base paths, but I couldn't hit. So I knew if I could get on first base somehow, some way. So I prayed for 4 pitches out of the strike zone. If one of those pitches hit me, even better. But I was a left-handed hitter, so maybe punch the ball in the hole between short and third, leg out an infield single, whatever it would take to get on first base. So you want to learn about how to drive the ball, how to hit the ball out of the park. A lot of other episodes you could listen to, and probably not this one.
So funny. So when you, and this is probably not a fair first question, but when you're coaching or when you're teaching your graduate level course on leadership at UCLA, you know, what's on the syllabus? What are the top, 3 things you're looking to teach your students in the semester?
So my class at UCLA is very different than a typical graduate level class, very different than a typical college level class. It's actually a lot more similar to my podcast. What I do is I bring in a lot of leaders, prominent, successful leaders across all kinds of backgrounds, business leaders, leaders in sports, military leaders. And what I do is I give students exposure to the most successful people, and in their own words, allow them to explain to students how to become more successful. Try to focus on 3 areas. Number 1, how to get a job. Once you get a job, how to rise within your career. Once you rise within your career, how to lead people and lead teams. I guide these conversations. I throw in my own insights. Some classes are me lecturing. Some classes are me just doing Q&A sessions with the students where students will come in and ask me anything. Questions can range from I'm experiencing this specific situation in the workplace. What do I do? To I'm about to go to a networking event. How can I more effectively cultivate relationships with people I'm about to meet? To how do you build relationships with the people who you're networking with? So it's just a lot of fun. Try to make it as practical and applicable as possible.
That sounds like a wonderful class.
I hope so. I love doing it.
Well, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into each of these 3 topics that you have here. First of all, how to get a job. If somebody listening is looking for a job, or if I know I have a lot of listeners that are college students, some that are a high school audience as well. What is it that you teach on how to get a job, or something that somebody can take that's looking for a job?
Well, first advice I would give to anyone who's a college student is enjoy your time in college. Soak it in. You're not going to be able to have that experience again. And I think all too often we're in a rush to take that next step, whatever that next step is. And we fail to appreciate where we are right now in the moment. So whether you're in high school or in college or in graduate school, wherever you are, appreciate where you are, appreciate the experience right now. And as important as it is to intern, to get work experience, to do this, to do that, I think the number one thing on your mind should be to soak in where you are, what you're doing, experience as much as you can. A big tip is to use the opportunity that you have being a student to connect with as many people as possible. I'm a big believer in the power of informational interviews. You could call informational interviews lots of different things, but essentially reach out to people, reach out to strangers, think about people who you're interested in talking to. Maybe they're in a field that you're interested in working in. Maybe they're in a field that you don't really know a whole lot about, but are interested in learning about that field. Reach out to them. If you reach out to a stranger, there are 3 possible things that can happen. 1, you never hear from them. 2, they say no. 3, they say yes. If you don't reach out, automatically the answer is no. So don't be afraid to reach out. I can tell you in my life, and even today, a lot of the best relationships that I've developed have just been by virtue of me reaching out to strangers, connecting, and taking things from there.
That's how you and me met.
Absolutely. And this is a lot of fun right now, and excited to go even deeper. And how does this happen if you're afraid, if I'm afraid? This is what life is all about. It's all about connecting with new people, building relationships with new people. And Ryan, something that makes you successful, something that has been allowed me to attain some level of success, has been not being afraid to reach out. But when you're at our stage in life, it might be a little bit more challenging from the outside looking in. It really shouldn't be. But when you're a college student, there should be no inhibition. When you're a high school student, there should be no inhibition. People love connecting with students. People love that student card. You're a student at UCLA, you're a student at USC, wherever you are, reach out to alumni. Reach out to people who aren't alumni. Everyone remembers that time in their life when they were a student, and there's that instantaneous connection.
That's so true. I spend time on college campuses when I'm speaking, especially recently, and some of the young men that I've mentored that started as maybe baseball lessons and then continued into a mentorship relationship as they went through college and into young adulthood. A couple of them were so eager to get into the workforce or to create something for themselves to make a difference that I saw them as a late 20s, early 30s, something myself at the time, not fully appreciating the fact that they were a college student with the whole future ahead of them and just being where their feet are. So I can fully relate to what you're saying about, appreciate the opportunity that you have while you have it, and definitely reaching out while you have that opportunity, because I agree. People love speaking with students. People love helping, lending advice, giving experience to young people. So that's such a wonderful concept that you have.
Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
I don't know if this is allowed. I know this is your podcast, but when you played baseball, regular season, 162 games, how much of your focus was on getting to the postseason? We have to get there. We have to get to October, as opposed to winning the game, focusing on making sure that I'm going to optimize the day, doing my best in the at-bat, doing my best in the inning.
Yeah.
What was it for you?
Well, so that's actually the perfect bridge, right? Between exactly what I hope this podcast can be, is between sports and between regular life or the business world. I think that the answer for me was always a duality. For me, I always tried to keep the end goal in mind, because if I don't know where I'm headed, I might be going in the wrong direction. Or if I'm not focusing on my goals, then I'm not noticing new opportunities to get there. With that being said, I need to focus on the pitch that's happening right now, because if I'm not paying attention to this 100-mile-per-hour fastball hurtling at my face, I'm not going to hit it, or I'm not going to catch it. And that happens within a 4/10 of a second. So it's big picture focus. Think about what you want to happen months from now, but also focus on these specific 4/10 of a second, because the big picture months from now can never happen without all of the 4/10 of a second in between now and then.
I love that. And that is so applicable to everyone listening, whether you want to play Major League Baseball, or I wanted to play Major League Baseball, or whether you have my skill level and you're never going to be able to play Major League Baseball. No matter what you want to do in life, you can apply that to your life. Everyone needs to set goals. You want to become successful, set clear goals. Now, your goals can be different than my goals, can be different than Ryan's goals, can be different than your parents' goals, your siblings' goals, your friends' goals, your neighbors' goals. It doesn't matter. We all have different definitions of success. The most important thing is that you have one. Whatever your definition of success is, make sure that it's clear to you and start working on it. There are going to be bumps on the road. There are going to be obstacles. There are going to be ups. There are going to be downs. There's no linear path to success. But as long as you're focused on that end game, as long as you're always moving forward, as long as you're always working toward getting there, you're going to get there. You're going to get there eventually. No such thing as an overnight success. Baseball takes 162 games to get to the playoffs, even if you're the best team in baseball. Still have to play out the season. No such thing as an overnight success. Interviewed hundreds and hundreds of the most successful leaders. Haven't heard a single person tell me that they made it to the top overnight. Takes time, takes work, takes effort. But the first step is, to your point, Ryan, setting that direction that you want to go to.
That's so true. And I want to get to some of the greatest guests that you've had on your 30-Minute Mentors podcast a little bit later in this episode. But before we get there, the second thing that's on the syllabus for your graduate class I want to get into there is how to get a promotion once you've got a job. In any field, in sports, in life, in business, if you want to stand out amongst your peers, you want to promote or get to the next level, what's your coaching or what's your teaching on that?
Well, one of the earliest guests I had on my podcast is a guy by the name of Dan Helfrich. Dan is the CEO of Deloitte Consulting. And I asked Dan, how did you become the CEO of Deloitte Consulting? And for some background, much in the way that I wanted to play Major League Baseball, you wanted to play Major League Baseball, you walk onto a college campus, everyone in college wants to work at Deloitte Consulting. I don't know why they don't want to play Major League Baseball, but they want to, I grew up wanting to play for the Angels. They want to work at Deloitte Consulting. And Dan Helfrich not only got a job at Deloitte Consulting, but rose and became the CEO. How? He told me not once in the course of his career did he ever think about becoming CEO of Deloitte Consulting. He became CEO of Deloitte Consulting because he was singularly focused on his job, excelling in his job, doing his job to the best of his abilities. I've heard that from so many guests, I would lose count. I did an interview 2 weeks ago where the guest told me that. Did an interview a month ago, guest told me that. I just hear this all the time from guests I interview in business. I did an interview with the CEO of a huge nonprofit who just told me this. You want to make it to the top, focus on doing the best possible work you can today. Don't worry about climbing the corporate ladder. Don't worry about maneuvering your way. Try to stand out by doing great work. At the same time, I would go back to the first point I made around reaching out to people. Really focus on building relationships. Build as many relationships as you can. Build relationships with people within your organization, outside of your organization. That's something that is never going to fail you. Your network, the bigger, the stronger, the more powerful your network is, it's a long-term investment. So focus on doing your work to the best of your abilities, invest in yourself, invest in relationships. You're going to be successful.
What you were saying right there reminded me of what Steve Martin says in his autobiography, Born Standing Up. It says, if you want to be the best, you got to be the best, right? Like, he was the first comedian to play stadiums. He was the first comedian to sell out arenas. And people ask, well, how did you do it? There wasn't this machine of publicity and marketing. There wasn't agents. There wasn't bureaus. And he's like, well, I was good. And when you're good, things happen around you. And that's what I hear you saying is, if you want to get promoted, if you want to become the CEO of a multinational corporation, be really, really good at what you do.
I'm going to throw another piece of advice at you, Ryan, and this is going to be something that I think might hit home for you, just given your background, not only in baseball, but in broadcasting. One of my earliest guests on 30-Minute Mentors is someone who you might know. Do you know Victor Rojas?
I do.
So Victor is a great guy, as you know, and Victor shared a great tip, which is a tip that I repeat on some episodes and is something that I think about all the time and applying to my own life. I asked Victor, what can anyone do to become a better broadcaster? And Victor said that when people break into the world of broadcasting, they usually have a broadcaster who they looked up to growing up and who in some way they try to emulate. And if you want to be a successful broadcaster, what you have to recognize is that everyone has their own unique voice. And to be a successful broadcaster, don't try to be like anyone else. Don't try to emulate other people. Focus on your own unique voice. Don't try to be the second best version of anyone else. Focus on being the best version of yourself. And that is applicable whether you're a broadcaster, that's applicable whether you're in any field, in any endeavor, in anything you do. What is it about you that makes you unique, that makes you special, that makes you different? Recognize that, appreciate that, lean into that, own that. Don't try to water that down. There are so many incredibly successful people around us that we should learn from. Learn from them, but don't try to copy them. Don't try to mimic them. Don't try to be the second best version of anyone else out there. Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question. Who do you think was the greatest color commentator? We were chatting a little bit off the air about broadcasting. Who do you think was the greatest color commentator in the history of football?
Of football? John Madden.
Yeah, it took you less than a split second to answer that. Is there anyone at all similar to John Madden?
No.
One of a kind, unique. There's only one John Madden. Be you. Be yourself. Don't try to be anyone else.
You're getting me jacked up right now, Adam. I love this. Before I run through a wall and ruin my podcast equipment here, I want to get to the third point you talk about in your class, and that's how to lead people. And this is perhaps the most difficult or the most messy one because everybody's different. So what are the pillars that you teach on as far as leading people?
Ryan, we could spend days and weeks and months on this, but there's a lot of misunderstanding around leadership. And I see in your background all the different helmets you have, all the different teams you've played for. How many different managers have you played for?
12 in the big leagues.
Wow. And then how many, do you even know how many managers you played for in the minor leagues?
Multiple dozens.
Lots of different styles of leadership out there.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you from my own experience as a leader and from my conversations with hundreds and hundreds of the most successful leaders, including many of the most successful leaders in sports, but leaders in business, the greatest military leaders. To be a great leader, not about leading through fear and intimidation, not about leading through authority, not about leading by telling someone, do this, do that, because you have to, because I'm the boss and you work for me. The very best leaders lead through inspiration. The very best leaders lead by compelling people, by persuading people, by getting to the why we do what we do. At the end of the day, there's free agency in baseball, but it takes some time to become a free agent. Outside of baseball, you're always a free agent. You don't like your job, you're going to go and leave. And in today's marketplace, there are a lot of different options. You can go and work for the company down the street. You can go and work in a different industry. You can even go and start your own thing. You can become a part of the gig economy and do a bunch of different things. People have options, and people don't tolerate bad leadership. People don't tolerate leaders who aren't able to connect, aren't able to compel the people who they're leading to do things because of that connection. So to me, that's a big one. That's the underlying principle. Something that I share with audiences. We've all heard of the golden rule. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. And it's a great principle to live by. We all believe in it. But as a leader, I actually think it's a terrible leadership principle. I think it could lead you in the absolute wrong direction. Because what happens if the people who you're leading don't want to be treated the way that you want to be treated? So I'm a believer in the platinum rule. Treat people the way that they want to be treated. Leadership is fundamentally about understanding the people who you're leading, building relationships with them, understanding what they're all about, listening, asking questions. The very best leaders are the very best listeners. The very best leaders are intellectually curious, care, have empathy. So these are a few of the elements that I talk about on my podcast, in the classroom, when I speak to corporate audiences, but it all comes together.
So much of what you just said perfectly aligns, even down to the platinum rule, with the leadership coaching I do through Spark Brilliance that was created by Jackie Insinger. If you haven't checked out her book, Spark Brilliance, or met Jackie, that's an introduction I can definitely make after we get done recording, but you two would hit it off for sure. That's wonderful. The best leaders are the best listeners. The best leaders ask the best questions. I fully relate to everything that you're saying, and they get to why. The leaders get to understand what gets people going and what makes them tick.
I did an interview with Kenny Lofton on my podcast, and I asked Kenny Lofton, who's the best manager you ever played for? And he told me Dusty Baker. Why Dusty Baker? Because Dusty Baker cared about his players. Dusty Baker invested in relationships. He told me about a story where Dusty Baker would always joke around with David Bell, back when David Bell was a player.
David
And
Bell, who I also
knew,
played for.
So yeah. And he knew David Bell liked a certain kind of fish, so he bought him the fish when they were on the road. And That's what it's all about. Whether you're a manager of a baseball team, whether you're a manager in a business, whether you're a leader on the battlefield, you opened up this episode, Ryan, with wanting to understand how do the core principles of leadership apply in any vertical. And I can tell you that the core principles of leadership are universal. What it takes to lead on the basketball court, no different than what it takes to lead in the boardroom, what it takes to lead on the battlefield. You talk to 4-star generals, you talk to the most successful coaches, you talk to Fortune 500 CEOs. Leadership is leadership. I did an interview with a guy by the name of Joe Moglia. Joe was a college football coach, won the award for top college football coach. And he was also the CEO of TD Ameritrade. So he led major college football program, Coastal Carolina, and led a major financial services company. What would Joe tell you? What did Joe tell me? Leadership is leadership.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I want to ask you about who is the most memorable guest that you have had on your show, and what is the one major point? I know you've given me a lot, right? You've already mentioned Kenny Lofton. You've mentioned 5-6 guests already, so I might be putting you on the hot seat here to pick out another one out of the 500 plus interviews you've done. Is there one interview that stood out more than another, and what was the major point that they made that stuck with you?
Yeah, so Ryan, that's a really tough question, and it's a question I get asked a lot. And the honest answer is that every interview I do, I learn a lot from. Every interview I do, I really enjoy. Every interview I do, as you could probably tell just from the interview that we're doing right now, I'm deeply engaged. It's a ton of fun for me. So if I have to go back and really think about what are the interviews that have like an extra level of meaning to me, firstly, before I even say that, I highly encourage anyone who hasn't listened to 30-Minute Mentors. What might be interesting to me or meaningful to me could be different than what's interesting and meaningful to you. But when I was a kid growing up, I didn't idolize CEOs. I didn't idolize founders. I didn't idolize political leaders. The people who I've been able to have on my podcast who I looked up to and admired when I was a kid, those are the ones that have had an extra level of sentimentality to me. So doing an interview with Joe Madden, being a huge Angels fan, and I met Joe Madden when I was a little kid. And when I met Joe Madden, I was pestering him for baseballs. Joe, can you give me a baseball? And I was chatting with Joe off the air that, I annoyed the hell out of him when I was a little kid. And here we are all these years later, and he's coming on 30-Minute Mentors. And, he had a good laugh about it. I did an interview with Bill Walton, which was a great one. And I grew up watching Bill Walton call Clipper games and Bill Walton call NBA on NBC and do games with Marv Albert and talk about being one of a kind. Everything you said that I said about John Madden, we could say about Bill Walton. I had David Robinson on the podcast, another really cool one. So those are a few examples.
Before I let you go, and I really appreciate your time, I ask everybody the same question at the end of the episode. If you could speak to a young Adam Mendler, before any of your success, before any of your leadership, national recognition, while you still had big dreams, what is the best advice that you could give yourself?
I still have big dreams. I'll tell you this, Ryan. I still am trying to get to where I want to be. Life is a journey. Every day, we're all still working toward our goals. So I don't think any of us have arrived. I certainly have not arrived by any means. One thing I wish I knew when I was younger is the importance of following what you want to follow. there's a temptation to listen to other people. And it's important to. It's important to take in the advice of people around you. It's important to surround yourself with people who you trust, people who have input that they can provide to you. But at the end of the day, you only have one life. It's yours. Live it. Live life on your own terms. Get in the driver's seat. Take control. And to anyone listening, yes, surround yourself with people who can help you take that next step, help you get to the top. But when you want to do something, when you deep in your heart feel like this is the right thing for me, don't be afraid to do it. So when I look back on my own career path and I think about the things that I've done, is something that I talk about, I'm a big believer that anyone who tells you that they have no regrets is either not being honest or not being intellectually honest. Very hard to live life with no regrets. We all have regrets. And when you think about the things that you regret, do you regret things that you did where you followed your gut and it didn't go right? Or do you regret the things where you didn't follow your heart, didn't follow your instincts, and regretted not doing it? So to anyone listening, to anyone out there, trust yourself, trust your instincts. It's your life. Own it. Take control.
That's so great, and I relate to that on so many levels. And it's also clear that you've said this and thought about this a lot, because your message and the packaging is so concise. It's so beautifully said. Adam Mendler, thank you so much for joining me today. I am Ryan Lavarnway. You've been listening to Finding the Way, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Finding the Way with Ryan Lavarnway. Find previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.